Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Henry Wallmeyer, President and CEO of the National Club Association. It's my pleasure to be today's moderator. We're so glad that you've joined us. The National Club Association and McMahon Group began producing Club Trends 70 years ago to share research and insight to help club leadership identify the trends in the club industry. And through the magic of this technology, we're now being able to bring these issues to life in these webinars. The current issue of today's webinar focuses on golf, and more specifically, golf's rising popularity and the trends in programming, amenities and facilities, as well as the challenges and changes affecting clubs. We have a great agenda and speakers lined up for you. We welcome and invite you to ask any questions of the presenters by typing your question into the question box. We will go through as many as we can at the end, time permitting. One question that I can go ahead and answer for you now is that yes, following this webinar, you will receive a copy of the slides, a recording of the webinar, and this issue of Club Trends. Today, you'll be hearing from Phil Mike from the National Club Association, Jake Fisher, Christian Clerk, and Kevin Carroll from McMahon Group. I will rejoin you at the end to moderate the question and answer session. It is now my pleasure to welcome in Phil Mike, NCAA's Senior Communications Manager and Managing Editor, who will set the table for today's webinar by giving us the macro perspective of the golf surge, its opportunities, and what trends we are seeing in golf across the spectrum. Take it away, Phil.
Thanks, Henry. And as Henry mentioned, this is the macro perspective. So this presentation will focus on trends that are happening outside of the club industry that could have an impact on your club. So obviously everybody knows that golf participation has boomed since the onset of COVID. But right now, National Golf Foundation data has signaled that we might have hit a peak already. So in the first 6 months of 2021, rounds increased by 23% compared to 2020. However, starting in June 2021, rounds only increased about 0.4%, and in July, August, and September, rounds have decreased by 4%, 7%, and 8%. This isn't to signal any red flags, but mostly to indicate that there's a potential here that we have hit a peak, and now we're in a new phase where clubs need to start focusing on really securing these new players and keeping this engagement at a high level. As many of you are aware, private club memberships are up, and also we're seeing the boom happen in the private club industry as rounds have increased by 20%. Equipment wholesale dollar sales are up on golf clubs and golf balls. They're up 77%, as well as with the onslaught of new equipment and gear for people to enjoy. But we are seeing some supply chain issues that are impacting the delivery of some of these items like golf grips and custom clubs. That could be a concern for people who are eager to play but can't get the equipment that they need. So we're seeing a lot of new golfers playing, of course, and they're coming from groups that aren't your typical golfer. Women's participation increased by 450,000 golfers in the last year, which is an 8% increase. And now there's 6 million female golfers in the game, which is the highest number in the last 5 years. About a quarter of new golfers are young. They're ages 18 to 34, with a third of them being women. And many of these new golfers, they started playing during the onset of COVID. 58% of them have. And they're seeking more comfortable and social environments, and they're not necessarily score focused. So on the chart here on the right, we see that Kemper Sports provided that only 12% of new golfers say that no improvement is a barrier to them playing. We're also seeing more targeted focus on junior and non-Caucasian golfers. About a quarter of junior golfers are non-Caucasian now, which is a dramatic increase from 20 years ago. And groups like First Tee now have 50% non-white players, which is a big increase for them as they've been targeting a lot of underserved communities. And we're also seeing a lot of junior discount rates. The United Golfers Association has worked with over 1,400 courses to provide $5 or less rounds for their golfers ages 6 to 18. I wanted to share this slide here that talks about the gender gap between men and women on their sentiment on how comfortable they are while playing. Comfort 1 in the upper right, we see the biggest difference where men feel most comfortable playing with other golfers. However, only 2 and 3 women feel comfortable playing around other golfers. And only 45% of lapsed female golfers feel that way as well. And in the bottom left, the sentiment of hitting a few good shots to get you playing again. Men and women generally agree, if they're current golfers, that that'll get them back. However, only 36% of lapsed female golfers, which really kind of emphasizes this point of trying to create a comfortable environment where people can learn the game but also have a good time. We've seen plenty of social media growth in the last couple years in golf that really are amplifying the golf's most fun aspects. And the PGA Tour and golf leadership is recognizing this. Their PGA Tour Player Impact Program is awarding a purse of $40 million to the 10 players who not only perform well on the course, but also off the course in terms of getting a lot of social media engagement and having a great online brand. We see here Brooks Koepka and Bryson DeChambeau, they've certainly made a lot of headlines with their feud. I'm not saying it's all theatrics, but they've certainly benefited and have been playing the game really well in terms of getting eyeballs on them and attracting a new crop of audience to enjoy the game and their personalities. And we also have a new crop of social media influencers. These are pros and amateurs alike. Paige Spiranac, who's an LPGA player, she has at least 7 million followers on her platforms. And Garrett Clark, he has 2 million followers, and he's an amateur player who started basically just doing trick shots. And he has found interesting ways to make the game more unique. So he has a video here, how many mulligans does it take to shoot birdie on every single hole? So they're producing content via images, podcasts, tips, videos, everything you can imagine just to amplify how the game is fun and enjoyable. And of course, you know, we have the memes here and videos where it shows sort of the more self-deprecating fun side of the game. Since the onset of COVID, there's been more courses that have offered walking only, but we're seeing a lot of benefits from it in the golfer's perspective and the course's perspective. There's more health conscious players out there now, and technology has enabled players to have lighter golf bags with them. Their push carts are lighter or remote control, so they can have a more enjoyable experience. And some clubs are benefiting financially. Hancock Golf Course in Austin saw an 82% increase in rounds played once they converted to walking only. So it's a much greater boost than just that COVID bump that many clubs are experiencing. And what they've noticed that there are better course conditions, there's a more even pace of play. There's a great mix of generations as players who are more health focused or want to enjoy the outdoors. They're both young and old, and by walking together, they're able to socialize more and really build up that sort of friendly component of the game. And there's a nostalgia factor here as well, harkening back to the way the game should be played in its most original form. Indoor and training facilities are obviously extremely popular, as we'll go into more in today's presentation. In the Chicago area especially, we're seeing a lot of these facilities pop up, and it's really a form of that Top Golf model where it's food and beverage and in a golf environment where people can have fun, learn the game in a low pressure environment. Cheekwood Golf Club, they have a very comprehensive and advanced training center that they're developing along with Jack Nicklaus, where they will have a 9-hole, 7-hole, and par 3 courses, a putting course, a 74-bay driving range equipped with high-tech equipment for people to track their shots, and not just F&B space, but also meeting spaces and business spaces, so you can work there as well and then hop on the range right after. And then they've also worked with the Tennessee Golf Association to really focus on developing youth and new players, as well as women, to get them engaged and to keep them sustained in the game. They've also partnered with the National Audubon Society to protect the wildlife on the courses there, and their par 3 courses walking only. So we've also seen a lot of superintendents prepare for volatile and extreme weather that's been popping up. There's plenty of ways to do this. For heat, extra fungicide and fertilizers are being applied to protect plants. What we're seeing from Toketee Golf Club in Oregon, their irrigation system has connected to their weather station to track hyper-local weather data so they can respond quickly in those short-term time windows when things can get very volatile. They also use the Greenkeeper app. This is a comprehensive tool that offers a lot of different services where you can time your spray applications, track product efficiency, monitor soil changes over time, track pest control and predict pest control issues, and optimize your playing conditions. And there's also clubs that are utilizing long-range forecasts so that they can prepare for particularly hot summers or a particularly hot year and really get ahead of the issue before they start seeing that short-term damage from volatile weather events. And then finally, we'll talk about this more throughout the presentation, but golf communities have seen a great boost. This is driven primarily by retirees, but also millennials who during COVID are seeking more outdoor space and just extra space. And so clubs like the club at Ibis are adjusting by accommodating them with outdoor dining, food trucks, outdoor gyms, and just amenities that benefit this sort of new type of member at their community. And we're seeing this pop up particularly in the South, Scottsdale, Arizona, plenty of places in Florida as well, and North Carolina is where this is most popular. So that concludes my presentation. I'm excited to introduce Jake Fisher, who's going to talk about our Pulse data.
Thanks, Phil. With that macro perspective as background, take a closer look at some of the data specific to the private club industry. In September and October of this year, McMahon Group conducted a pulse survey of general managers in the private club industry and also other club leaders. And we really had two purposes in conducting this study. On the one hand, we wanted to get a better idea of the impact the golf surge has had, challenges and opportunities, but also maybe some of the unintended consequences this increase in play has brought. And on the other hand, we also wanted to ask some questions that we asked in 2017 on a pulse survey also on golf, and do some really interesting year-over-year analysis of those larger trends. So with that in mind, let's look at some of the highlights from this survey. Here we just asked respondents to give us a better idea of what golf facilities, amenities, even programs are available at their club. It wasn't too much surprising here, with the exception of two categories. You can see those in bold: ball flight tracking technology like Top Tracer, TrackMan, some others we'll get into later in the presentation, and also simulators. Both of those categories are up double digits from 2017. Now, Kevin is going to go into more detail on the various ways ball flight tracking technology is being used by clubs, but the trend here that really underlies this data is the adoption in private clubs of analytics. And in the digital era, there's just a new vocabulary around practice facilities in the game. You hear things like velocities, angles of ascent, ground forces. Now, this data is not just helping professional golfers or even avid and frequent golfers, but it's also helping beginners as they learn the game, learn how to improve their game, and also importantly, have fun doing it. So let's dive a little bit deeper into some simulator data here. Now, we asked this question in 2017. We asked it again in 2021. And we asked clubs who have simulators, does your club have a social gathering space with lounge seating, maybe food and beverage service around the simulators? As you can see, in 2017, only 37% said yes. Compare that to 77% in 2021. And it's hard to imagine, but about 4 years ago, there was a lot of ambiguity about what these spaces were in private clubs. Were they a social space, or were they, just a practice amenity that you could put in a closet somewhere and maybe not give much thought or attention to the design of it? But now there's a consensus that seems to be gathering around what these spaces should be. And it's a social space first. And that's really exemplified by this picture you see here of Interlochen Country Club in Edina, Minnesota. Just a lot of thought given to the design of this space. You can see the two simulator bays in the background with the high top bar seating. More in the foreground, you see the bar and the mounted TVs. And really a unique feature here in the putting green. So you can imagine being a member here. There's just a variety of environments that you can enjoy. And it's great for parties or events, but equally a great space to just hang out in and enjoy a game or a tournament while also getting to swing the club. Moving on, here are a couple more comparison charts comparing 2017 and 2021. One thing we noticed is that members of clubs that don't currently have simulators are being a lot more vocal in requesting those at their club. You see 71% of managers at clubs that don't have simulators are hearing that request from members. And of course, we asked the top golf question here. Would a top golf style social venue work at your club? It's a somewhat modest increase, but changing hearts and minds takes a little bit of time, and it's really these sociable environments that Phil was mentioning before, these low pressure, fun food and beverage, golf amenities that are increasingly finding a home in the club world. Moving on to golf play. The season's ended at many clubs in 2021. It hasn't begun yet in others, but we wanted to get some idea back in September and October of how 2021 compares to 2020. As you can see, 57% of managers say golf rounds are up. Phil mentioned earlier that through the first 6 months of 2021, there's I think 25% increase in rounds compared to 2020, and certainly the data here echoes that. But there's also a more varied picture. You see some people saying golf rounds are about the same, and some even saying that they're down. But judging from the hard numbers, the rounds are still very high and certainly show no sign of abating. Now, with this increase in play, bring a lot of challenges. And Kevin, again, is going to go into some of these challenges in more detail. But one thing that was interesting we found was we asked if clubs instituted a tee time policy in response to the increase in demand, and more than half said yes, they had to. We also asked about some of the challenges. Comparing that from 2017 to 2021, you'll see staffing is overwhelmingly, the major challenge facing private clubs right now. Grounds crews, nearly half of, or over half of clubs said that's an issue, and also professionals and pro staff. And also, let's plant a flag at maintenance there. 20% say that's a challenge in 2021. Compare that to only 8%. And again, it's hard to believe, but in 2017, the number one concern was participation, getting people to play. Now we have the opposite problem. So here we wanted to know a little bit more about who's contributing to the increase. We divided sort of the golfers into 3 categories. You might call them avid or frequent golfers, occasional golfers like myself, and then new golfers. And there's a lot to digest here, but just focus on that bottom right bar graph there, the heavily contributing. See that 40% of managers say that avid or frequent golfers are contributing the most. And that's sort of what we expected, especially in light of what the National Golf Foundation has found. It's these people that are playing a lot more. But much more interestingly, you can see there that 23% of general managers, almost a quarter, are saying that new golfers are heavily contributing to golf play. And that certainly indicates to us that people aren't just trying it out and then giving it up, but they're sticking around. They're going back to the club, and they're really enjoying their experience. Here, we look to the future a little bit. We wanted to see what the level of optimism or pessimism was. So we asked respondents to agree or disagree that the increase in golf play at my club will persist for the foreseeable future. And you'll see a note of optimism there. Over 80% of people agree with that statement, and hardly anyone really disagrees. So the forces that are contributing to this golf surge don't look like they're going away anytime soon. But I will say that it's not without its challenges. You see that statement below, my club does not have the capacity to accommodate the increase in demand. And over a quarter agreed with that statement. There's sort of some interesting geographical breakdowns there where some clubs in the Northeast are more likely to agree with that, and also the Southwest. But it's interesting to note, and we'll go into a little bit more detail in that. But on that note of optimism, I'm going to hand things over to Christian Claire here, who's going to talk about some interesting new facilities that are really answering to this moment.
Thanks, Jake. That's a great overview of what's happening in clubs today and also in the broader marketplace. And if we look to the future, I think it's important that we consider who's consisting the future. Who are the people that are going to be coming in and occupying our clubs and playing on the course. And a critical transition that we talk about, but I think this graph really shows us that 2022 is the peak year of the 65-year-olds that were born in the baby boomer generation. So 1957, the population birth rate peaked, and for the next 15 years, it's going to baby boomers are going to the birth rate's going to decline. So not only are there going to be fewer boomers, but the number of boomers that we're going to have in the pool that would be club members are going to be fewer. But that's offset by the number of millennials that are coming on board. So even though that we have retirees that, you know, in the last 10, 15 years, we may have experienced some pressure in the club market because of the decline in baby boomers. And for any clubs out there that may have an older age of initiation, or any retirement communities, that difficulty is going to be heading your way. But it's offset by these emerging 40-year-olds, these millennials. And so when we think about, well, what are clubs doing, or what have clubs done in the past, we know that clubs are geared for people that are over 46 years old. And we know that because if you rate the overall satisfaction of your members, the very satisfied members in your club are going to be in that over 46 category. So the question is, what do we do differently than we've done in the past, or what can we learn from what those preferences for those under 46 as they move into that over 46 group? And so if you look at what's important to members, one of the things that's key here is that golf is still important. 81% of members rank it as important, but it's not as important as golf practice. So the practice facilities are actually more important when you look at all the members in your club, all the users. Those golf practice facilities are more important. And if you look at some of the other social recreational activities, it's way more important for the under 46 group of the social, the tennis, paddle, swimming, children's activities. And so those are things that we want to kind of dive into. Well, what was it about those? Is it just because they're family, or there are other things that we can uncover that really helps us understand how this next generation is thinking? And I think this is a great example of a club that has all of those amenities, but is also transforming the way that they are offering the golf experience for their members. So the Playground Short Course in Blue Jack National it's a high quality course, right, Jake? I mean, it's the manager mentioned that.
Right, Christian and I spoke with the folks over there at Blue Jack, and they really emphasized that the course isn't a gimmick. There's no clown's mouth or windmill, but really the conditioning, the roll, the terrain, everything plays as it would on the larger course. And they even mentioned that they had a Pro-Am recently. It was 27 holes, 18 of which were played on the larger course, 9 played on the playgrounds. So, that gives you some idea that you can do something like this without compromising on quality.
Yeah, and I thought of this course. I was at a committee meeting, and we were in a 65-year. Everyone there was over 65 years old, and there's a woman essentially describing what she had seen on their course. Was a young man, probably around our age, was pushing a stroller while he was playing, and so then ensued maybe a 3 or 4 minute discussion on the rules and enforcement of rules and safety. But I just love that picture of that little guy chipping shots towards the hole there. And that gets to another point in clubs and the amenities that we're offering. And so when we look at, there's just this recent article in the Wall Street Journal about groupthink. And so when you think, okay, groupthink is when you have a small group of people together that they're talking to each other, and because they're not considering the outside environment, that they make the wrong decisions. And what the article sheds some light on is actually that's not correct. So groupthink, the studies that they did in developing the term groupthink, were actually a group of people that didn't know each other. and that they were acting in a way to try and form cohesion when they didn't have it. And that people that are actually tight knit are willing to challenge each other. They're willing to come to the table and say, hey, we should do that, we shouldn't do this. And that's where we can really push the conversation forward. And when you think of clubs in golf, there's a great example in the marketplace of how you can have a golf course as a broader amenity, but not only focus on the family. And that course is Ines by Rob Collins and Tad King in Hudson, New York. And the great thing about this is it really latches on to the trends that we're seeing today about wanting to be outdoors. Now, a lot of that was accelerated from COVID, but it gets at this authenticity in design.
Yeah, and this is really a unique club concept, and it sort of straddles the line between public and private. But it's fundamentally a country resort type club, and think farm to table, artisanal, organic. These are some of the buzzwords that you might associate with the club. But what's so interesting is the appeal it makes with its golf course, and it really does this in two ways. It's with this sort of naturalistic design that Christian mentioned, but also sort of the strategy element that's embedded in the course. Christian mentioned the course designers King Collins. They're known as the maverick designers of courses now, and they were sort of inspired by the Scottish links of a bygone era, with images of families picnicking in nature and hikers, and it almost feels like a park. And you can see the course sort of emerges from nature as opposed to overlaying it. And there's really no rough to speak of. The vegetation is wild. And even in maintenance, your mowing plan here is pretty simple. You mow greens one way, you mow fairways the other. And then the other aspect is the strategy. The designers call it a puzzle, and it really plays differently for everyone and all types of players. And sort of you unlock it as you go along. And one example is you can make sort of freestyle decisions, like teeing off on the second tee, going for the seventh hole, and it's just this variety that is really interesting. And I said it was a unique club concept, but it really has a lot in common with the work of Gil Hansa, who works a lot in the private club industry. His work owes a lot to sort of the golden age of architecture and this return to nature. And interestingly, maybe ironically, we're finding that this is really popular among sort of millennial generation.
Yeah, it's kind of redefining what constitutes a fun experience. Yeah. And I think that's key, because we look at the family friendly, we look at this new definition of fun, and there's a recent study by the National Golf Foundation that focused on how do you convert someone that may be on the fence or past, that maybe a little bit more engaged with golf, to a committed golfer where there's an emotional attachment. And what you'll see here is that further up the chart is someone that was more converted, and to the right, the more instances of that happening. They found that if you had something fun, if you had something that you were playing with somebody that you knew, or if there was a program that helped you kind of overcome that barrier or that social discomfort that Mike talked about, or Phil talked earlier about on the in terms of the women and the new beginner latent golfers. I think there's a lot that you can unpack here. So if you look in the club world and say, well, what are the opportunities for this? I think that the Crags is a great example of how you can take a putting course and use that as an extension of your clubhouse. And why is this important? Because I think sometimes people will think of putting courses and they think they might be gimmicky, but this photograph shows there's this environment, this placemaking. So this idea that there's an intersection, there's a key intersection point between the clubhouse and the course. A lot of times that can be after golf porches. You're looking at the 18th green. Sometimes it can be a putting course. But the fundamental difference, looking over a putting green, fundamental difference so between those and the putting course is that it's flexible, right?
Right. Yeah, and there's just a variety of ways you can play this if you do choose to use it as a putting course. You can play it at, like, I think 18 holes, kind of like the larger course, but you can also completely improvise your experience. You can play horse. You can, I think, play, one shot from all the way across the green to the other. It slopes 30 feet to the right, 40 to the left. And then, as Christian said, at night it can sort of transform into this social environment. And it could also just be a playground for kids at times.
Yeah, and then like they did here at Castle Pines, you really can highlight the environment that you're in. And I think when we looked at golf as this trophy, that there was maybe we weren't as we were in experiencing the environment, but really engaging in it and doing it in a more recreational way. I think that there's a key opportunity there for a lot of clubs. So not all clubs have the room though to create a putting course. It's just you're landlocked. You're trying to squeeze in pickleball, paddle tennis, all these other activities that are really attracting the millennials. So to create an environment where you can have that flexibility and that social interaction, simulators are really hitting the mark. But a key thing to really recognize about why simulators are taking off the way that they are is because the video games essentially came on board when the millennials were growing up. A lot of us went into bars and there was a golden tee, and that was socialization. And so when you think about and you're talking about video games and understanding how to program those spaces, how to really engage members, the important thing is that the older generation may look at video games as they would look at solitaire, a game that you're just playing on your own. But it's really it's more like canasta, right? So you get in a group of people together and you're playing as a game together and just using the computer to keep score, really. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kevin. He's going to look over some more golf challenges and really focus on some of the cutting edge practice facilities that we've got coming on board.
Thank you, Christian and Jake. I appreciate it very much. Well, we could spend a whole hour just talking about golf challenges and what's going on in our industry today. But I thought I'd highlight a few of the things that are going on and talk about some of the possible solutions that are out there, just to get you thinking about what those might be. Some of those challenges, of course, the key one right now is the supply chain issue. So many things going on and so many different examples. I was just in the pro shop here at Jupiter Country Club earlier this morning, and range balls are back ordered about 90 days. I was talking to a merchandiser at another club a few weeks ago, asking her what kind of merchandise she was going to have in the pro shop in the coming season, and she said whatever they'll deliver to me is what we'll have available, because we just don't know. I was talking to a golf course superintendent. He had mower reels that had been ordered back in April, still not been delivered yet. So everybody's experiencing those challenges, and it's certainly no secret to our members. But I believe we have to use our communication methods and all of those that we can to let our members know how that supply chain issue is affecting us at our clubs. We need to set the expectation for our members so that they know when they come out to the club. Just like today at Jupiter Country Club, had I not known there was a delay about the range ball delivery, I would be a little bit disturbed about the condition of the range balls because they're pretty beat up. So letting people know about what they can expect when they come to your club and how that has affected you is going to be vitally important. As far as the pro shop merchandise goes, sell what you've got available. Whatever the merchandisers can sell you, get it out there in front of your members and let them know what you've got available. And maybe your margins need to change a little bit during these times of tough supply chain issues. Maybe you need to lower our margins just to get people in the shop. They might not see the favorite brand on the racks, but maybe there's something else that you can entice them to buy. So something to think about there. As far as labor issues go, certainly labor issues in the golf course, labor issues in the pro shop are no different than the labor issues that we're experiencing throughout the club itself. And again, our members need to know about that. It needs to be part of the discussion that's going to be ongoing throughout month by month until that resolves itself. So make sure that you're just communicating as best you can as to how all these issues are affecting you. Some of the things we can do and some of the things we can look at is focus on technology. And technology has really made a big difference in everything that we do over the last 10 years or so. But there are more things we can look at. Our mowing vendors out there are looking at things like autonomous mowers, just like autonomous driverless automobiles are out there. We're certainly working on autonomous fairway mowers. And while they've become very popular in Europe, especially in Sweden, the people here in the United States our governmental agencies are looking into this and trying to protect us from ourselves, evidently, because they're not allowing those out there just yet. But we do have robotic mowers on driving ranges. We have robotic ball pickers on the driving ranges as well. So there are some things out there. There's a lot of software out there too that superintendents are using, things like advanced scoreboard, scheduling tracker software, apps on phones where the superintendent can change the duty schedules of the work crew midday just by a simple, a couple touches on the iPhone or whatever it may be to make those changes. So important to look at what's out there and see what you can do as far as that goes. The other area as far as communication goes has to do with being much more high touch and much more visible. I think it's very important for the superintendent, the golf professional, general manager to be out among the members as much as possible. Now's the time more than ever for the pro to be out on the driving range and have the superintendent right out there with them. Again, to let them know what course conditions are all about and how labor issues have been affected, supply chain issues have been affected, and all of that. So again, use every communication channel available to you, but being front and center is very important. I was talking to the
I got it.
Kevin, your microphone turned off.
Your microphone's off, Kevin.
Should we send it back to this one?
Kevin, it looks like we're having issues with your audio coming through. So we're gonna jump in here to help.
Yeah, we'll see if we can get Kevin back here soon, but Christian and I here will take over for now. But before that issue, Kevin was talking about increase in native areas, sort of these high touch things around the golf course. And it's sort of a piece of what we were talking about with Innes, just to get a through line here. There's two reasons you might want to do something like this. On the one hand, it's eminently practical. The amount of money you're spending on water and seed is so much less, and also it increasingly is something that club members find desirable, particularly in a younger generation. So as you try to make that appeal, this sort of naturalistic look is an attractive one.
Yeah, I think it's balancing that desire to achieve that appeal, but make sure it fits in with the aesthetic of your course.
Right.
What's key, I think, even when you're looking at the challenge, is really looking at what's going to keep people coming back. And we saw that as having three main components to that fork. One is the enhanced practice facilities. So that includes the simulator environments, but it also includes the flight tracking, and that comes in hand with having the facilities, the raise up bays where you can put those flight trackers in inclement weather, but also looking at it in terms of entertainment, like you were talking about earlier, Jay.
All right, yeah, and we're going to take a look at some interesting case studies here. Here you see the Atlantic Athletic Club, sort of under construction, but this is This is not the driving range of old. You can see there are a variety of shots you might make here, and you could practice tee shots, short, intermediate shots, and that's really a larger trend in practice facilities that we're seeing. It's practicing specific shots that you're going to make on that golf course, and this is located in the suburbs, I think, of Atlanta.
That's right. So it's a key location in that members will stop by the course on their way home, and that was one of the reasons why the club decided to make the investment, was that they saw that there was an opportunity in order to essentially capture their members on their commute home.
Right.
And so some key metrics and things that they did. Well, one that really jumps out at you is that they have the same fairway grasses as they do on the course. But they don't necessarily do that on the greens or in the bunkers, right? So you keep the fairways the same, so the ball rolls the same, but when you get to the greens and to the bunkers, it's artificial and it's fabric.
Right. Yeah, and you also see there's sort of a premium divot mix with seed, peat, clay products to retain moisture, and just a lot of thought given to how resources might be allocated here and conserved.
Yeah, they went with that premium mix so that they could cycle through more aggressive grass, so that they were able to reduce the downtime that members were off. And so by having that grow faster, they were able to get the members back onto the course, and it takes a little bit more of a beating with that two-pronged approach there.
Right, and we mentioned in trends in the Challenges to Golf article that grass seed and creative agronomic practices are something that are really important in this COVID period. I think the prices vary day to day, but something like your typical grass rye seed is going to cost 2 times as much right now, and you might not even be able to get it. So it's interesting to just look at and see different examples of clubs that are thinking creatively and flexibly along that front.
Yeah, and in Atlanta's case, they're taking those artificial mats and they're bringing them in, so on the super high use areas, they're able to preserve that so then they can cycle that in and out.
All right. Here's the club at Ibis, I believe, and Phil mentioned this as an example earlier, but you can see there's this interesting X-shaped pattern here on this double sided range. You can imagine your experience here on any given day might be different depending on where you situate yourself here, and just a variety of shot opportunities. You can practice hook, slice, draw, or what have you, and it's really nothing that we've seen before in the club industry.
Yeah, it's the Nicklaus design, right? So that you can hit from any one of those 4 corners in. So in one way, it mimics the hitting down the fairway. And what's really interesting about this too is the innovative approach to the design, but also the engagement of the digital technology. So it's a hybrid, right? So you're out there, you're using it, but then you have your iPhone. So they put stands out there, so you can take your phone, you can be hitting this great design, but then also have that same top tracer type of technology that you would have at the top golf facility right there on your phone.
It really gives members access to sort of their own metrics and their own progression in the game, just having that app on your phone. And increasingly, these tools are going to be at your fingertips, and we're seeing that certainly in the club world. And the final thing we'll mention here is they have these true stretching stations, which I find that that's a nice feature, because whenever I'm going to the range and stretching, I always feel a little self-conscious. So it's nice that they give some thought to that.
Yeah, put them on the shoulder.
Yeah, exactly. And here is Martin Hall and Annika Sorenstam, a tremendous golfer on the female tour as I was growing up. I remember at the Ibis Grand opening there.
Here's a great view of the targets and the greens, and Kevin had mentioned earlier the introduction of robotic mowers, and those autonomous mowers really aren't allowed onto the courses yet, but OSHA standards, but that they're using them on the ranges. So they're collecting the balls, they're cutting with these little robots. And,
right.
There's a recent article that 2021 was the year of the robots, right? The most robots sold this year than ever before.
Yeah, it's certainly a trend that's not going to reverse itself, we think, and something to keep an eye on as we go forward.
And here's Shelter Harbor Golf Club, there's a lot of practice facilities out there, but we thought this was one that was well done. And it's great because it's got the indoor hitting bay, but it also has that outdoor space, that outdoor covered adjacent, and you're looking out onto the range.
Right. Here's St. Andrews in Scotland. So you see this is having an impact all the way across the pond here. You can see the sort of hitting bays there on the right, and then over to the left, those sort of individual range bays. And
yeah, it's great. I think I think the Top Golf, those guys were from the UK, right?
Oh yeah.
So there's this cross harborization. This is how a private club would build it, and
all right. So some of the teaching tools we're seeing here, K-vests, and these are sort of digital monitoring devices that are sort of overlay you as you hit. They can measure everything from like spine angle to your hip twist, and these, I think they're called biometrics a lot. And again, many of these teaching tools are facilitated by a variety of devices now, but the more this technology advances, the more this will be on your phone and at your own fingertips. But right now, offering some of these things is something that clubs at the cutting edge are doing to give people better tools at their disposal.
Yeah, the focus, the specialization, so having a specific tool for a specific growth development area, and it's definitely being adopted in a lot of clubs.
All right.
Hey guys, can you hear me now?
We can.
Welcome back.
Hey, thanks. It's great to be back. If you don't mind, I'll chime in and talk a little bit about Los Altos Golf and Country Club out in Silicon Valley.
Hopefully we did the part justice to your presentation that you were out on.
You guys listened very well during rehearsal. I couldn't have done it better myself. That was awesome. I was talking to the general manager, Randall Berteo, out at Los Altos, and it's a wonderful country club, like I say, out just south of San Francisco. And they've got a beautiful golf course, but they've never had a driving range there. So when it came time for their pro shop renovation and to build a brand new pro shop, they decided to include 8 simulators, and they use the Full Swing technology, which is kind of part of that Top Golf parent organization. So they're putting in 4 of these simulators so that members can come out and warm up before they go out and play golf. Since they don't have a driving range, now they can use the simulators. And they've also worked with Full Swing to put their entire golf course on that simulator. So someone can come out and play, half a dozen holes or something on the simulator before they go out and play the real course themselves. So they're looking forward to opening that just here in December. So it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. And they're so sold on the simulators that they're also bought 2 additional ones to use in an entertainment and party room space, just like some of you were talking about before. And then they've added another simulator just to be used for lessons and instruction. So a total of 11 golf simulators at one country club, which thus far, that's the most I've heard. There may be more out there, but it'll be interesting to check back in with Randall to see how popular that is once everything's up and running. So we talk about golf and golf as entertainment and how we continue to sustain the increase in golf, and there's a number of ways to do that through teaching and through the simulators and through technology. Something that Boca West has just done, again, this is brand new for them, just opening up now. They've used a technology called InRange, and InRange uses radar rather than cameras. Their driving range has homes on either side of it, so they're not able to light up the driving range at night because it would be a distraction to their members. So they selected the InRange technology to use this radar. During the daytime, the teaching center there can be used by their low handicap golfers and golfers who want to improve their games. For as large a club as Boca West is, they only have about 100 what they would call really low handicap golfers. So their teaching center and their driving range didn't get a lot of use. So they turned the teaching center into a 19th hole, and now they've turned this 19th hole into kind of a Top Golf entertainment center. But during the day, golfers can use it. They can use all the monitors and the technology that they have there. And then in the evening, it turns into more of a social scene where members can come in and utilize the equipment for more of an entertainment purpose and enjoy food and beverage. So they've got 7 stations under the awning there that they've built out. They have 3 more further back under canvas awnings. And then they have 19 more stations with iPhone stands where members can download the InRange app and utilize their own phones to use them as simulators themselves and track their progress and keep their own scores and records and that kind of thing. So since they've installed the radar system there, the driving range is now full, where before it wasn't getting much use at all. And here's a scene of that, what was once a teaching center, and then the 19th hole is now turned into a fun environment in the evening, the indoor-outdoor environment with the nano-wall type doors that open and close. The players themselves have a 26-inch tablet that they look at, and not a 26-foot as it says on here, but and then 60-inch monitors for those that sit back on the sofas and see how the players are progressing. In the evening, Matt Lindemans has told me that they are going to require reservations for that, and they most likely will put in some kind of food and beverage minimum so that they don't just have people come out there and sit and use the technology all evening without spending any money. And then they'll probably go to some kind of rotation, whether it's 60 or 90 minutes, to let people utilize those spaces as often as they can. And then just on the opposite side of that, as far as high-end, low-end, here's a small club up in Albany, Minnesota called the Albany Golf Club, kind of a semi-private club. Their dues, I think, are less than $2,000 a year, but they invested some money in their driving range and their driving range experience with simulators. And again, you know, you look at the awning there, and it's the 2x6s that still haven't been painted and that kind of thing, but they're getting a lot of use from the townspeople and a lot of people coming out. So once you decide to get into this technology, the sky's the limit on how much money you want to spend, but you can certainly do it on a much more cost-effective basis. Start off small and then progress towards something better. Simulators, we talk about how they're utilized in high-end places. Well, here the Four Seasons Resort in Houston, Texas has put in simulators right next to their lobby bar, a very high-end area, and they found it a great way to keep people entertained and bring more customers in. The other great thing with these simulators in family environments is that they're not just for golf. And if you look at these simulators, they offer everything from, you know, throwing baseballs and footballs and those kind of games to hockey and dodgeball and all kinds of things. So they're really great for family centers or family dining operations and that kind of thing. So anyway, it's something to look at. And, you know, my question would be, you know, is it right for your club? Is this the kind of thing that you might want to try? And it certainly seems to be sweeping the nation. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Henry to check about any questions you might have.
All right. Thank you very much, Kevin. Sorry for that technical difficulty that we had right there, but glad you were able to come back to us, and glad the rest of the panel is coming back to us now for the Q&A session. For all the attendees out there, please submit your questions under the questions tab. We'll get to as many as we can before time expires. We want to be cognizant and respectful of everybody's time, you know, here. So with that, first question will go to you, Kevin. Do you think many clubs have too many rules?
Wow, a great club has very few rules, I guess, but I think rules are important to set the expectation. Members need to know what is expected of them and their fellow guests, and part of that has to do with orienting new members as they come in and orienting the members that you have at the club. But you know, some clubs have probably too many rules, and some clubs don't have enough.
Do you see that this the pandemic, following the pandemic, is that going to, do you think, majorly change clubs and their rules? Are they going to look at things differently?
I think they're going to have to look at utilization. We have a lot of questions about now golf courses and tee times being harder to come by since COVID, and clubs are certainly going to have to look at how they do things on the golf course. We had some members ask if they should reduce their membership rolls, and I don't think they should. I think that the pendulum swing both ways, and at some point we will have a recession, and clubs might not be as popular, so you're going to need all the members you can. So you just need to look at the policies you have in place and work around them, whether they're guest policies or restricted access tee times or limiting the number of guests that are on the golf course. I think the same thing. Some clubs have even had to limit social events, Christmas events. We've got a lot of things coming up here, but restricting those to members and their immediate families because they've become so popular with guests. So I think all those things need to be looked at to take care of the members that you have in place and make sure they're not discouraged about coming out and using their own club.
Okay, great. Thank you. Jake, you had touched on the pulse survey results at the beginning. From doing that survey, what did you find the most interesting or surprising results that came out of that?
For surprising, I would say some of the data we collected around the sort of social environments around golf, and the private club industry isn't known always as moving fast on adoption curves, but I was surprised by sort of the speed at which clubs have started changing their simulator spaces into these social environments, and there's almost just an entire consensus in the industry that this is what members want, and that's sort of rare. And we knew that this is the direction things were heading, but I don't think I fully anticipated when I sort of wrote that question that there would be that much consensus around that point.
Okay, we'll sticking with that and simulators. Christian, you'll say, that question: how will introduction of simulators and flight trackers change golf at private clubs for the long term?
Well, I think it relates to what Jake's talking about, this idea of change, and that as the millennials are coming on board, we're talking, also Kevin mentioning rules, this idea that there are rules to encourage certain types of behavior versus others. But I think the fluidity and the pace of change is going to be much faster. And so I love the story of Alistair McKenzie. I love it because he goes to war as a surgeon, learns camouflage, comes back, and he starts designing courses using the camouflage techniques he used or learned and used in World War I. And I think about that, and I look at golf right now, and I look at the adoption of technology, and you can imagine that someone else might come, maybe it's augmented reality, comes in and starts modifying the way that we camouflage or experience golf. Half of our brains are 50% used for visual stimuli. So I think that it's really opening the door, this generational shift, this adoption of technology, and this expectation and this culture that golf has. It's going to move into the long term. It's always adopted, but when we look into the future, I think that it's pretty exciting when you think about it.
No, absolutely. All right, Phil, I'm going to come to you with this one. Since you are a millennial who's new to the game of golf, the question is, what are some things that millennials or you, would make, what are those things that would make a better experience for golf for folks, in your age bracket?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I started playing predominantly at the beginning of COVID. A bunch of my friends have, and we've been doing research on this as well. Golf's a hard enough game to play well as it is. We don't need any more things to kind of make it more difficult. So one of the ideas would be to educate players on pace of play. There's nothing more frustrating than seeing somebody down a fairway and seeing them grab a club from their cart if it's cart path only, and then running across a couple times. And that's not necessarily their fault. They're just simply not educated on it, or they don't really know what ready golf is, or they're not effectively using their golf cart to really optimize their time and keep the pace of play up. So I think starters in the pro shops and coaches can educate these new players and identify them to really make sure that they're not under stress trying to play, they're keeping the pace up, and they're making other players behind them have a good time as well. And along with this too, I think affordable instruction. We're seeing the Union League of Philadelphia offer complimentary lessons to their members. there's certainly a bit of ambiguity in terms of, should you do a group lesson? Should you do a single lesson? How expensive is it? There's so many components to the game. It can be overwhelming to the point where you sort of have the analysis by paralysis where you don't have any lessons in general. So there's ways where you can maybe bundle around with some golf lessons or vice versa there to make it a more seamless transition to get your new players playing better and having a good time.
Okay, great. Thank you. Kevin, come back to you. It's two questions that are basically the same. With staffing shortages, how many clubs are increasing pay for golf professionals or golf course maintenance? Or more clubs offering a better quality of life, i.e. no more than 40 hours, some weekend days off? And then also with labor shortages so prevalent in the marketplace, what are clubs doing regarding dues to increase, to fund increased wages?
Good questions, and those are questions we certainly get all the time. And wages have gone up, and wages will continue to go up because members will not tolerate being short-staffed. So they're going to have to pay the brunt of it, and dues are going up accordingly. There was a recent survey, I believe, with club benchmarking, and the clubs talking about taking lots of clubs in the 5 to 8 to 10% range. But I've heard of some clubs. I was talking to a general manager this morning on the phone, and they just notified their members of a 24% dues increase, and they substantiated it with a lot of data. They talked about wages and what the wage increases needed to be on par with other clubs in the vicinity, and what other dues rates were with other clubs in the vicinity. And the notice has been out about a week, and they said they would have meetings with any member who wanted to come to meetings to talk about it. So far, they only had 2 members sign up to attend those because the communication out to the members about the dues increase was so compelling that it answered all the questions. So I think, dues increases beyond the norm are certainly going to be the case for the next year or two. Some clubs may need to take the dues up, 6, 8, 10% over a course of a couple of years. Some might be able to do it all at once. But again, it goes back to communication and justifying what needs to be done. But members have to know, especially with clubs who have long waiting lists. They're full with waiting lists now, so people are wanting to get in.
Right, and are you seeing any examples of what clubs are doing who are short-staffed and what they're trying to do to make sure that they keep their employees? Are they, giving them, more time off, not making them work the nights, the weekends? How are clubs being able to? How are they handling, short staff?
Well, it's tough enough getting staff, but the ideal for many clubs is to certainly hire more staff and give more people time off, the weekends off, the evenings off, and that kind of thing. And I believe we're going to see that in the future, that, instead of 1 sous chef, there's going to be 2 sous chefs. Instead of, 3 assistant golf pros, there may be 4 or 5 assistant golf pros, because people need to have that time off. They need to have personal socialization time, just like the members have. If there's one thing COVID has shown us, and that is with our members, is they miss socialization. They miss being around people all the time, and our staff are the same way. They want to be around other people when they can't do it when they're working nights, weekends, and holidays. So it's just going to take more of them to rotate them through, and that's going to come at a cost.
Okay, I got time for a couple more. Easy one. I'll sit with you, Kevin. What should a club budget for a golf simulator? I know you mentioned Los Altos has 11 of them. That's
yeah. Well, that's a great question. It's funny. I was looking at when I was researching simulators, and they range anywhere from a really good commercial simulator from $20,000 to $75,000 before you talk about the infrastructure and the build out. Our immediate past president evidently put one in the White House, and it was about a $50,000 number there. So that gives you some indication. I think the first thing to do is really determine what you want your simulator to do, what functions you want it to perform, and get out there and do the research and try them out and see what's going to work best. I think if you go too much on the low end, you're going to be disappointed, and it's going to be wasted money because your members will come in and start using it and then demand better functionality and better technology, and then you just have to upgrade.
okay. And Christian and Jake, I'll come back to you for the last one. What are your recommendations to create a comfortable environment, aka less competitive, in the private club sector with a major capital investment?
Could you say that again, Henry?
So basically, to create a comfortable environment. What are your recommendations to create a comfortable environment, you know, a less competitive environment in the club? I guess when you're playing golf, doing that with major capital investment. So what investments should a club be looking to make?
Well, I think one is flexibility in programming. And I think that's the key, but say like the Crags, is the idea that you could use it during the day and then something different at night, or even Boca West, this idea that the low handicap golfers, they're going to be practicing fine tuning, and then at night it becomes a social outlet. So when you're looking and you're allocating, you know, very precious capital dollars, it's important to recognize that every club has different use groups. So we're all part of the same club, we all have the same values, but we may use the club at a different time in a different way. And not every event is going to be a club-wide event. So keeping that in mind, then, you know, as you're looking forward and you're master planning and you're figuring out, well, what are we going to do going into the future? I think one, first have a plan. Two, make sure that you're letting members give you a priority for that plan.
Yeah, and Christian mentioned programming too. There's an article in this issue about junior programming actually, and the article began as an article about programming more generally, but we found that a lot of the interesting lessons about getting people to stick with golf in a low pressure environment, where a lot of those lessons were, you know, in evidence in junior programming. One example is Operation 36, which many of you will be familiar with, and sort of getting people on that path to learning the game by starting them closer to the hole. It's very intuitive, it's very obvious, and it's something that applies to all ages. So it's not a capital dollar expenditure per se, but that these types of programs that are very smart about human psychology and about learning something new go a long way.
Well, and I think also the attitude of the avid golfer with those beginner golfers, I think that can go a long way. So having programs where you're getting the very experienced with the brand new, because, you know, there's nothing like taking out your driver and everybody saying, oh, here comes the excavator again, you know. So I think having that culture of, okay, accepting learning as it's coming through and creating the environment and the programs around that can be really helpful.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you, gentlemen, very much. Thank you, Phil, Christian, Jake, and Kevin. And I thank all the attendees for participating in this webinar. We look forward to having you join us for our next webinar, which will be on February 10th, which will focus on our Outlook 2022 issue, Sustaining Momentum, Keeping the Generational Club Energized. Until then, thank you very much and have a great day.